I fail to understand why a display of petulance over parliamentary procedure should override the vital need to address the suffering of people in Gaza. That seems to have become the main story rather than the vital need. So,
who's been petulant?
All of the damn people in Westminster, as far as I can see.
Including the Speaker?
I think, actually, he was trying to be even-handed, personally. I think the people who walked out in response to his position were the petulant people I'm talking about, I suppose.
OK. Barry Gardner, let's start with you. Were people being petulant today?
Look, most people come into Parliament wanting to do good, wanting to serve their community. Today, I felt soiled by the whole thing. Anthony, the answer to your question is it shouldn't override it. The most important thing that we were supposed to be discussing today was those children in Gaza, those people in Gaza, and also those people in Israel who have their loved ones as hostages, which is just insufferable. And we should have been discussing how we move to an immediate ceasefire. And I think I do believe that the Speaker genuinely wanted to try and let everybody have their say. But the trouble is, when you think you know what people are going to do and you don't follow the rules, then sometimes you make a mistake. And I think that's what the Speaker did today. And I feel sorry for him because he's a really genuinely good man who was trying to let everybody have their own say on what they felt the situation was. But you see,
there are two versions of events here, aren't there? Lindsay Hoyle, when he stood up and made his apology about an hour ago, that's what he said. He said, my priority is to keep MPs safe, and I thought I was doing the right thing by letting everyone have their say.
Yeah.
Nick Watt from Newsnight is reporting that he was put under pressure by senior Labour figures, possibly including Keir Starmer. He said, well, if you don't allow our amendment, now the government to put down one as well, don't expect to be Speaker under a Labour government. Now, I have no idea whether, but that's the allegation. Lindsay Hoyle has denied that. He did it on the floor of the House of Commons. But that is becoming quite a big story.
Well, if that were true, it would be abhorrent, of course. And I take the Speaker at his word when he says that wasn't the case. But the way in which the procedure is ordered normally on an opposition day is rather counterintuitive. Normally you think that you take an amendment before you would take the substantive motion. But actually, because it's an opposition day and parliamentary procedure wants to allow the opposition to have their day in the sun, their say on the matter, it's normal that the opposition day motion gets heard before the amendment. But because there were two amendments today, that was reversed, and it meant that the Labour amendment would be heard first. And if, as everybody expected, the Conservatives had voted against the Labour amendment, then the SNP amendment would have been heard. And the Conservatives then decided they would withdraw their amendment, and that meant that the Labour amendment would then succeed.
Are you with me at the back?
Exactly. Anthony, the short answer to your question is it was a complete mess, and it should never have happened in that way. And as I say, I just feel soiled by the whole thing.
Matt Warman, the SNP have a right to feel aggrieved, don't they?
Yeah, they absolutely do. So look, I think I've been a MP for 8 and a bit years, throughout the whole Brexit period, throughout some pretty excruciating scenes, and today was as bad as it has ever been, and it was bad for two reasons. The first is that we allowed partisan politics to obscure the horrific events that are going on in Gaza. And you can criticise the SNP for trying to box Labour in through their motion in the first place. You can criticise Labour for trying to get out of it. Whatever happens, partisan politics obscure.
You can criticise the Conservatives for putting down their own motion
and
as
you
well.
You can also criticise the Conservatives. That is a huge problem, that obscuring of that important issue. But the other thing that happened that is also hugely important is a huge chunk of Parliament wondered why the Speaker had behaved in the way he did, and they doubted that he was an honest broker. And that, for anyone living in the UK, having faith in the standards that govern our democracy matters. And if you say that that the Speaker is at serious risk of allegation that he has made the Labour Party's life easier, or that he has, perhaps more seriously, put the SNP in a position where, when they control the order paper for their opposition day, it's become a Labour opposition day, that is a big constitutional issue.
Does that imply that you've lost confidence in the Speaker?
The House, when I was sat in it, certainly, in my judgment, did not have confidence in the Speaker. When he came back to the chair after a lot of demands to summon him back to the chair, I don't think he helped matters, and I can't see a way that he can recover the confidence of the SNP and of a huge chunk of the Conservative Party.
And you include yourself in that chunk of the Conservative
Yes.
Party by the sounds of it, so you think he should go?
I think, as things stand right now, his position is untenable.
That's quite something for you to say, because I mean, there was one MP, I think, shouted something at him about that he didn't like, and this MP on the Conservative benches was told by Keir Starmer by Lindsay Hoyle to withdraw it. And I'm thinking, well, that MP isn't going to ever get called again. And the fact that you've now said on this programme that you think he should go, if he hears about that, you might not get called very regularly.
I'm not sure I'm his biggest problem right now, but I...
well, you're a problem.
It speaks volumes about Lindsay that actually I have no doubt that he will, knowing what I think or not having heard what I think, I have no doubt that he would still treat me just the same as he would treat any other MP trying to get called or trying to speak or whatever it might be.
Okay. Just for the point of clarity, you still have confidence in Lindsay Hoyle, Barry Goldman?
I think he's a really decent man, and I think he tried to do his best, but he made a mistake. He then came back to the House and apologised for it. I hope that we won't be so inward-looking that we just keep on focusing on our own belly button, but get on and look out at what's happening in the world and try and do something about it.
Trevor Phillips, you've been around as long as I have watching procedures in the House of Commons. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Nope. And I hope sometime during this evening, Ian, you'll explain why you ever wanted to be in that place.
Well, I kind of grown out of it.
That'd be great.
Look, I think some of this is obviously accident. I don't think anybody this morning thought this was going to happen tonight. But I think that there's an underlying issue, and there's an outstanding question which my parliamentary colleagues might be able to answer. I think that there's a basic problem here, which is that it became clear that everybody who was active here, all the players, as the Speaker described them, were more interested in party advantage than they were in the substantive issue. And that, I think, is what the public's going to take away. And I think, frankly, if I were not a polite person who has to deal with parliamentarians every week, I'd say that's an absolute effing disgrace. So that's one point. Second point, I think, is what we're seeing here, and on our programme on Sunday morning, Rachel Johnson, your colleague here, made a very, very important point. I asked her what she thought the election campaign is going to be like, and she said, nasty, brutish and long. And I think we're seeing the first emanations of that today. The one thing which I was very surprised, and I'm puzzled by, I don't quite understand it. When the Speaker made his comment, he talked about the safety of MPs. And I'm trying to work out what it is that's going on here. What is it that made him
Because there are many MPs, and I think particularly Labour MPs, who are being threatened by pro-Palestinian constituents because they haven't voted or spoken out in favour of a ceasefire, and they are coming under huge threats. And they fear for their families, and it is part of the Speaker's remit to try to protect MPs as much as possible.
Well, if that is the case, and maybe I'm overstepping the mark here, but if he genuinely believed that members of the House of Commons were having their votes essentially decided or influenced by fear of harm, then he should not have allowed the debate to take place. You cannot have this kind of chicanery as an answer to intimidation. I mean, if that's the real truth of what made him decide what he was going to do, I think he should have said early today.
Let's ask our two colleagues here. I mean, am I right?
Situation.
Was I right in what I said just then?
Yes, you were. A number of colleagues have experienced intimidation. I think probably, the Speaker realised that if people could not have a vote to express exactly what their position was, then that would be a problem for certain people.
Well, that is the biggest thing coming out of today. If our representatives cannot vote according to their conscience, that, to me, dwarfs all the parliamentary chicanery. That wasn't the issue. It dwarfs all of the other issues. That's the big issue today.
It wasn't that they couldn't. I don't know anyone who has been subject to that sort of pressure who would not vote with their conscience.
Well, then why did he choose to change the procedure?
Because he wanted them to be able to express their view, to say what their genuine view was completely. And if they had not been able to vote on all of the motions, then all of them would not have been able to do that. That was, I think, his thinking.